Have you ever felt like life has quietly boxed you into a smaller version of yourself? Like no matter how hard you push, you're stuck in a cycle of settling for the okay job, the half-hearted relationships, the dreams that keep getting postponed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Mediocrity isn't something that happens to us. It's something we allow. Day after day, we make tiny compromises, letting comfort dictate our choices until one morning, we wake up wondering where our potential went. But what if there was a way to break that cycle? Not through hustle culture or empty motivation, but through something far more enduring. 2,000 years ago, the Stoics cracked the code on this very struggle. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome at its height, put it bluntly, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the heart of Stoicism, not just a philosophy, but a battle plan against the forces that keep us average. This isn't about abstract ideas gathering dust in old books. Stoicism is a toolkit for action. It's about recognizing that while we can't control every obstacle life throws at us, we can absolutely control how we respond, and that response is where true victory lies. Think of the last time you faced a setback. Maybe it was a rejection, a failure, or just the weight of daily stress. Now imagine facing it with unshakable calm, not because you're ignoring the pain, but because you've trained yourself to see beyond it. That's the Stoic Advantage. It's what separates those who crumble under pressure from those who use pressure to forge something stronger. Today, we're diving deep into the Stoic principles that can pull you out of stagnation and into a life of purpose. We'll explore how to build resilience that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances, how to turn obstacles into fuel, and most importantly, how to reclaim the agency you've been surrendering bit by bit. This isn't about quick fixes or superficial wins. It's about rewiring your mindset so that no matter what happens, you're the one directing the story. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: mediocrity isn't your default. It's just what happens when you forget how powerful you really are. And this video, it's your reminder. What if your biggest barrier isn't circumstance but your own mindset? That's the question Stoicism forces us to confront. Mediocrity, through a Stoic lens, isn't just about lacking talent or opportunity. It's about surrendering your power to external validation and comfort. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential Stoic teachers, put it plainly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. In other words, the trap of mediocrity springs from chasing approval, clinging to easy paths, and mistaking temporary comfort for real fulfillment. Take modern workplaces as an example. How many people settle for roles that don't challenge them, simply because the paycheck is steady or the expectations are low? They show up physically but check out mentally, trading growth for the illusion of security. Stoicism would call this a failure of perception, not because ambition is everything, but because passive acceptance is a slow form of self-betrayal. The Stoics didn't preach relentless grinding, they preached intentional living. It's the difference between drifting through life on autopilot and gripping the wheel with purpose. Here's where most people get stuck. They assume their circumstances define their limits. But Stoicism flips that script. Your boss, your budget, even your past mistakes, those are externals. What you control is how you engage with them. A Stoic doesn't wait for the perfect job to start excelling. They excel in the job they have by refining their focus, discipline, and attitude. Think of it like training in a gym with rusty weights. The equipment isn't ideal, but the real workout happens in your effort, not the tools. So where are you settling? Maybe it's tolerating half-hearted relationships because confrontation feels uncomfortable, or postponing creative projects, telling yourself, someday when things calm down. These are the quiet compromises that build a life of good enough. But Stoicism asks, good enough for whom? The version of you that's afraid to stretch, or the version that knows your potential is limitless? The moment you stop outsourcing your worth to others' opinions or waiting for permission to grow, mediocrity loses its grip. That's the Stoic mindset, not perfection, but relentless progress. Seneca once wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." That single line captures the essence of Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of not just accepting your circumstances, but loving them. This isn't about passive surrender or putting on a fake smile when life gets hard. It's about recognizing that every obstacle, every setback, even every painful moment contains the raw materials for your growth. Imagine two people hit by the same storm. One curses the wind, the other adjusts their sails. Both face identical conditions, but only one thrives. That's the power of Amor Fati. It transforms victims into architects. Take the story of Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher exiled to a barren island by Emperor Nero. Where others saw punishment, he saw opportunity. Instead of wasting energy resenting his fate, he turned that rocky outcrop into an open-air classroom, teaching philosophy to anyone who would listen. His exile became his legacy. That's the mindset shift Stoicism offers. What if your greatest frustrations aren't roadblocks, but detours leading somewhere unexpected? Here's where most people misunderstand Amor Fati. They confuse it with toxic positivity, that forced, shallow cheerfulness that denies real pain. But Stoicism demands something far more courageous, looking adversity in the eye and saying, "I will find the value in you." When Marcus Aurelius lost 8 of his children to illness, he didn't pretend it didn't hurt. He grieved deeply, yet still wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. That's the heart of loving your fate, not denying struggle, but using it as chisel to carve out a stronger self. So let's make this practical. Think of a challenge you're facing right now, maybe a job you feel stuck in, a relationship strain, or a goal that keeps slipping away. Now ask, what if this isn't happening to you but for you? What if the frustration of your routine job is training patience? What if that difficult relationship is teaching boundaries? Amor Fati doesn't mean you stop striving for better. It means you stop wasting energy fighting reality and start mining it for wisdom. The project that failed taught you resilience. The rejection letter redirected you to something truer. Even the days that feel like setbacks are secretly rehearsals for your comeback. This is how you dismantle mediocrity, not by waiting for perfect conditions, but by falling in love with the imperfect journey. Because here's the truth no one tells you: the people who change the world aren't the ones with the easiest paths. They're the ones who learn to dance in the storm. Mediocrity shrinks from barriers. Greatness uses them as stepping stones. That's the core Stoic truth Marcus Aurelius lived by when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. It's a radical shift in perspective, one that doesn't just tolerate obstacles but embraces them as the raw material for growth. Consider Cato the Younger, the Stoic statesman who faced exile, political betrayal, and even death with unshakable resolve. Where others saw defeat, he saw a chance to prove his principles. When Julius Caesar's armies closed in, Cato didn't plead or compromise. He chose to fall on his sword, not out of despair, but as the ultimate act of defiance, a refusal to let external forces dictate his integrity. To a Stoic, even death wasn't an obstacle. It was the final test of character. Now, let's bring this into your world. Think about the last time life threw a wall in your path. Maybe a job rejection, a financial setback, or a personal disappointment. The average response, frustration, resignation, maybe even self-doubt, but the Stoic response, curiosity. Ask yourself, what if this isn't a blockade but a redirect? History is full of stories where forced detours led to unexpected triumphs. J.K. Rowling's early rejections pushed her to refine Harry Potter into a global phenomenon. Steve Jobs' ousting from Apple became the fertile ground for Pixar, and his eventual return with revolutionary ideas. The pattern is clear: the people who leave a mark aren't the ones with the smoothest journeys. They're the ones who learn to read obstacles as road signs pointing toward something better. Here's the practical shift. Next time you hit resistance, whether it's a project hitting snags or a goal feeling out of reach, pause and ask, how could this very obstacle be serving me? Maybe that delayed promotion is forcing you to build skills you've neglected. Maybe the relationship that ended was freeing you for something more aligned. The Stoics didn't magically erase hardship, they trained themselves to see through it. Like a blacksmith's hammer, resistance isn't there to break you. It's there to shape you. So what's the barrier you've been avoiding? The uncomfortable conversation, the risky career move, the creative project collecting dust. What if leaning into it, not away, is the exact pivot you need? Mediocrity whispers, wait for clearer skies. Greatness answers, the storm is where you learn to fly. How would you walk through life if failure lost its power to paralyze you? That's the question at the heart of Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of anticipating challenges before they arrive. Far from pessimism, this is mental armor forged in advance. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who advised Emperor Nero, would regularly rehearse adversity in his mind. He'd visualize losing his wealth, his status, even his loved ones, not to dwell in despair, but to disarm fear's grip. By confronting worst-case scenarios in the safety of his imagination, he discovered a profound truth. The sting of adversity lies not in the event itself, but in our unpreparedness for it. Consider how elite athletes use this same principle. Before a race, a sprinter doesn't just picture victory, they mentally rehearse stumbles, false starts, even rivals pulling ahead. Why? Because when the moment comes, their nerves don't hijack their focus. They've already lived through the struggle in their mind, so their body follows a path their brain has mapped. Entrepreneurs operate the same way. The most resilient don't just fantasize about success. They game plan for supply chain disruptions, market crashes, and sleepless nights. It's not fear-mongering, it's strategic preparation that turns obstacles from surprises into expected hurdles. Here's where Stoicism flips conventional wisdom on its head. Most people avoid thinking about failure because it feels uncomfortable. But what if that discomfort is the exact training ground you need? Imagine you're about to pitch a big idea at work. Instead of just hoping for applause, take 5 minutes to mentally walk through the worst that could happen. What if your slides fail? What if someone interrupts with a tough question? By pre-living these moments, you drain them of their power to shock you. When the real challenge arrives, you're not caught off guard. You're ready to adapt because you've already navigated this terrain in your mind. This practice isn't about inviting disaster, it's about reclaiming agency. The entrepreneur whose imagined bankruptcy files a backup plan, not a resignation letter. The parent who's mentally rehearsed a child's tantrum responds with calm, not confusion. Even in relationships, Premeditatio Malorum changes the game. Picture the hard conversation you've been avoiding, the one where you set boundaries or speak a difficult truth. Play it out in your mind, feel the tension, hear the possible pushback, then watch yourself staying grounded. When you finally have that talk in reality, you'll speak from clarity, not fear. So here's your challenge. Pick one looming challenge, a project deadline, a fitness goal, a vulnerable conversation, and spend 3 minutes mentally walking through the obstacles. See the delays, feel the resistance, then watch yourself navigating them with focus. That's the Stoic secret. Excellence isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to sail in any weather. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life every day is never short of time." Few ideas cut through complacency like Memento Mori, the Stoic practice of remembering death not to incite fear, but to ignite urgency. While modern culture treats mortality as a distant abstraction or macabre taboo, the Stoics placed skulls on their banquet tables and kept skeletons in their classrooms. Not as morbid decor, but as visceral reminders. This breath, this opportunity, this moment is fleeting, and that's precisely what makes it powerful. Consider how differently we'd approach our days if we carried this awareness forward. That project you've been delaying, the conversation you've avoided, the passion you've shelved for someday, what if someday never comes? The Stoics understood that death isn't merely an end. It's a lens that brings life into sharp focus. Seneca drilled this into his students with brutal clarity. You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. We fear loss as if time is infinite, yet hoard our potential as if we'll live forever. This is the paradox that fuels mediocrity, the delusion that we can always start tomorrow. Modern distractions amplify this illusion. Endless scrolling, trivial debates, the busy work we mistake for productivity, these aren't just time wasters. They're anesthesia for the soul, numbing us to the pressing question, is this how you'd spend your final year? The ancient Stoics held funerals for the living, where participants would lie in coffins while friends eulogized them. Far from grim theater, this was an awakening exercise. When you're forced to hear what might be said at your graveside, pretense falls away. You stop chasing applause and start asking, what legacy am I actually building? Here's the transformative twist. Memento Mori isn't about obsessing over endings. It's about revolutionizing beginnings. Steve Jobs captured this when he said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Faced with a cancer diagnosis, he didn't despair, he distilled. Every meeting, every product, every no became more intentional because time's value was undeniable. That's the Stoic secret hidden in plain sight. Mortality isn't your enemy, it's your most honest advisor. So let's make this uncomfortably practical. Grab a sheet of paper and write 2 sentences at the top. If I had 12 months left, I'd stop wasting time on. And if I had 12 months left, I'd finally start. No vague answers. Name the mediocre habits you'd purge, the half-hearted relationships, the safe but soul-crushing routines, the dreams you've minimized to fit others' expectations. Then pinpoint the boldest version of yourself you've been postponing. That gap between your 2 lists, that's where your power lies. Because here's the truth no one wants to hear. You don't need more time. You need less compromise. The clock is neither cruel nor kind. It simply counts. What you do with those ticks is entirely yours to choose. Some things are within our power, while others are not. With those words, Epictetus sliced through the noise of human suffering like a surgeon's scalpel. The Enchiridion, his manual for living, begins not with complex theories, but with this stark division. It's the foundation of Stoic power, recognizing that mastery over life doesn't come from controlling every external event, but from ruthlessly focusing on the one thing you truly command, your judgments, choices, and responses. Every moment of frustration, every spiral of anxiety, every instance where mediocrity gains ground, they're all variations of the same mistake, pouring energy into what lies beyond your reach while neglecting the territory you actually govern. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. Your palms grip the wheel, your eyes dart to the clock, your mind races through consequences. Now imagine another driver in the same jam, windows down, listening to an audiobook, using the delay to reflect. Identical circumstances, radically different experiences. The difference isn't the traffic, it's where each person placed their focus. The first driver fixated on the uncontrollable, the red taillights ahead, the ticking clock. The second exercised control over the only thing they could, their inner state. This is the Stoic dichotomy in action, not passive resignation, but active prioritization of where your power actually lies. Modern life bombards us with false domains of control. Social media, metrics, other people's opinions, the unpredictable moods of a boss or partner. We treat these as if they're dials we can twist to our liking. But here's the paradox: the more we chase approval or perfect conditions, the more we dilute our agency. Consider the artist who abandons bold work to please algorithms, or the employee who molds their personality to fit office politics. These aren't just compromises, they're surrenders of sovereignty. Stoicism confronts this with clarifying brutality. You can't control whether others admire your art, but you can control making it authentic. You can't dictate corporate decisions, but you can choose integrity over assimilation. Let's make this visceral. Grab a pen and split a page into 2 columns. On the left, list what genuinely falls under your command, your effort, your honesty, how you interpret events. On the right, the illusions of control you've been clinging to, others' perceptions, market trends, past mistakes. That right column, it's a ledger of wasted energy. Every minute spent agonizing over those items is a minute stolen from what you could actually shape. The ancient Stoics trained like athletes for this discernment. Before speaking, they'd ask, "Is this within my power?" Before acting, "Am I responding or reacting?" Now comes the liberation, that coworker's snide comment, move it to the right column. The weather derailing your weekend plans, right column. The obsession with looking successful on social media. Right column with a bold underline. What remains on the left is your empire, small in scope, infinite in potential. This isn't about lowering expectations, it's about redirecting focus to where your efforts compound. The composer can't force audiences to applaud, but can master their craft. The athlete can't control referees, but can hone their skills. Mediocrity thrives in the right column's chaos. Mastery grows in the left's disciplined soil. So here's your challenge. For the next 72 hours, conduct an experiment. Each time you feel frustration rising, pause and audit. Is this within my control? If not, visualize placing it on a raft and pushing it downstream. Then turn your gaze to what's left in your hands. You'll discover a startling truth. Most of what weighs us down was never ours to carry. And in that lightness, that's where your real power begins. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned exile into a classroom, put it bluntly: we must train our desires as rigorously as an athlete trains their body. This isn't about deprivation, it's about liberation. Every craving you refuse to indulge is a chain you break, freeing energy for what truly matters. Imagine 2 paths, one where you chase every shiny object society dangles before you, and another where you consciously choose what deserves your hunger. The first leads to exhaustion, the second to extraordinary focus. That's the discipline of desire, not shrinking your life, but sharpening it like a blade. Consumer culture thrives on manufactured dissatisfaction. New phone models convince you last year's is obsolete. Social media inflames envy with curated highlight reels. Even the self-improvement industry often sells you on fixing imaginary flaws. Against this noise, Stoicism stands like a mountain, unshakable, silent, reminding you that fulfillment was never about accumulation. Consider Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest humans alive, still living in the same modest house he bought in 1958 for $31,000. His secret isn't frugality for its own sake. It's the recognition that every dollar spent on status symbols is a dollar not compounding toward real freedom. The Stoics would nod in approval. Desire, untrained, is a leaky bucket. Poor in achievements, possessions, even relationships, and it always demands more. But when you consciously tighten the bucket seams, that's when you start holding water. Here's the transformative question: what single desire, if removed, would unlock your highest potential? For some, it's the craving for constant validation that keeps them tweaking presentations instead of launching ventures. For others, it's the itch for luxury cars that chains them to soul-crushing jobs. The ancient Stoics practiced voluntary hardship, sleeping on floors, wearing plain clothes not to punish themselves, but to prove comfort wasn't their master. You don't need extremes, but you do need awareness. Track your impulses for a week. Notice how often you reach for snacks, screens, or shopping carts, not from need, but from the hollow ache of more. That ache is the enemy of greatness because it keeps you too distracted to notice you're already holding the keys to your cage. Minimalism isn't the goal. Clarity is. When you stop conflating wants with needs, you discover something radical. Your best work, your deepest relationships, your most meaningful contributions require very little externally. The writer doesn't need a perfect desk, just a blank page and the courage to fill it. The entrepreneur doesn't need a corner office, just a problem worth solving and the grit to see it through. Even love thrives not on grand gestures but on presence. This is the Stoic edge. While others exhaust themselves chasing the next hit of dopamine, you're already where it matters, fully engaged in the work only you can do. So try this experiment. Pick one arena of your life, your closet, your calendar, even your conversations, and strip it down to its essentials. Keep only what serves your growth or joy. You'll quickly spot the desires masquerading as necessities, and in that space between want and need, you'll find something surprising: the leverage to build a life that doesn't just look successful, but feels significant. Because here's the truth no advertiser will tell you: the less you crave, the more you already have. Seneca once shocked his students with a radical exercise. Set aside a certain number of days to eat the poorest quality food, wear rough clothes, and ask yourself, is this what you used to fear? At first glance, it sounds like self-inflicted hardship, but this is negative visualization in action, the Stoic practice of mentally stripping away comforts to rediscover their worth. Picture waking up tomorrow to find your bank account emptied, your career vanished, or your closest relationships severed. Not to dwell in dread, but to jolt yourself awake to what you've taken for granted. The paradox is this: by regularly imagining loss, you stop craving more and start seeing the abundance already in your hands. Modern life drowns us in comforts so constant they become invisible. The smartphone that connects you to loved ones, the roof that shields you from storms, the morning coffee ritual that grounds your day. These aren't just conveniences, they're modern miracles we've been conditioned to expect. But here's what happens when you practice negative visualization: that slow drip of entitlement evaporates. Think of digital detoxes where people voluntarily surrender their devices for a week. Initially, there's withdrawal anxiety, boredom, restlessness. Then something shifts. Conversations deepen, attention spans lengthen, sunsets regain their color. The very tech we resented losing becomes a tool we choose with intention rather than a pacifier we mindlessly suckle. This practice isn't about guilt-tripping yourself into gratitude. It's about rewiring your perception of wealth. A study at Harvard revealed something startling. lottery winners and paraplegics reported nearly identical happiness levels 1 year after their life-altering events. Why hedonic adaptation, our brain's cruel trick of normalizing any circumstance, good or bad? Stoic negative visualization hacks this tendency by forcing us to lose blessings before fate does it for us. When you mentally surrender your health, your home, even your morning cup of tea, you don't just appreciate them more, you start wielding them as fuel. That project you've been postponing, suddenly urgent when you imagine losing the ability to pursue it. That grudge you've been nursing, trivial when weighed against the gift of time with the person you're resenting. Here's your challenge. Pick 3 comforts you'd miss desperately if they vanished: your morning run, your creative tools, your weekly call with a parent. Now spend 3 minutes vividly imagining life without them. Feel the void. Then watch what happens when you reclaim them. Your jog isn't just exercise, it's legs that carry you. Your sketchbook isn't just paper, it's a mind that creates. That phone call, not an obligation, but a sacred thread to someone who shaped you. This is how negative visualization transforms complacency into combustion, not by diminishing what you have, but by revealing its true weight. The Stoics knew a secret modern psychology confirms. Absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder, it makes the soul grow sharper. When you periodically strip away the noise of abundance, you're left with something far more powerful: the clarity to chase what matters, not because you lack, but because you finally see what you stand to lose. Marcus Aurelius never intended his journal to become one of history's most profound works of philosophy. Those pages we now call meditations were private, raw, unpolished reflections scrawled by candlelight in military tents and palace corridors. They weren't meant for praise or performance, they were a battle plan for his own soul. That's the power of Stoic journaling. It's not about crafting pretty prose for an audience. It's about confronting yourself with ruthless honesty, then emerging stronger. Where social media rewards curated highlight reels, Stoic ink stains reveal the messy, unfiltered work of growth. Think of the last time you vented online. Maybe you polished a complaint into a witty tweet or framed a struggle as a triumphant lesson. Now imagine writing those same thoughts in a notebook no one would ever see. The mask falls away, no applause to chase, no pity to court, just you and the truth. That's the crucible where real transformation happens. Seneca called this his daily audit, a ritual of examining where he'd stumbled and where he'd stood firm. Not to wallow, but to course correct. A modern parallel, elite athletes reviewing game footage not to berate themselves, but to spot patterns invisible in the heat of play. Your journal is that playback. Here's how to structure it like a Stoic. First, wins. Not just achievements, but moments you exercised virtue. Did you pause before reacting in anger? Did you choose integrity over convenience? These are your proof of progress. Next, failures, but with a twist. Frame them as feedback, not indictments. Instead of "I procrastinated again," ask, "What fear was I avoiding by delaying?" Finally, lessons, one actionable insight to carry forward. Maybe it's realizing your patience wears thin when you skip meals, or that social comparison spikes after midnight scrolling. These aren't grand revelations, they're tactical adjustments, the way a sailor trims sails to catch the wind better. Tonight, try this experiment. Grab any notebook, no fancy pens or calligraphy needed, and write one entry as if you were your own most trusted advisor. Not the version of you that craves validation, but the one who knows your potential is buried under excuses. Describe today's pivotal moment, where you rose to the occasion or shrank from it. Then ask the question Marcus asked himself: is this what I want to be doing when death comes? The answer isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to wake you. Because the difference between a life of depth and one of distraction often boils down to this simple habit showing up on the page day after day to excavate the person you're becoming. Epictetus cut through the fog of excuses with 6 blunt words. If you want to be a writer, write. No workshops, no waiting for inspiration, no perfect conditions, just the unglamorous act of putting words on a page. This is the Stoic antidote to analysis paralysis, that crippling hesitation where dreams go to die in committee, meetings with yourself. Consider how many brilliant ideas never leave the brainstorming phase because their creators became archaeologists digging endlessly for more data, more validation, more guarantees before breaking ground. Meanwhile, mediocrity thrives in this hesitation. It's the safe harbor for those who confuse preparation with procrastination. History's most transformative figures didn't wait for clarity. They created it through action. Thomas Edison's lab notebooks reveal something startling about his 10,000 failed light bulb attempts. He didn't consider them failures. Each singed filament was a data point, a stepping stone. While others theorized about illumination, he burned through iterations literally. That's the Stoic mindset in practice. Progress isn't born from flawless plans, but from treating every stumble as tuition paid toward mastery. The writer drafting mediocre paragraphs today will outpace the perfectionist still outlining their masterpiece a decade from now. Creative fields are especially prone to this paralysis. How many painters stare at blank canvases fearing the first wrong stroke? How many entrepreneurs shelve ideas because the business plan isn't airtight? Yet Stoicism reframes this. The only true wrong move is no move. Musonius Rufus taught that virtue isn't demonstrated in contemplation alone, but in the sweat of action. Imagine 2 sculptors. One endlessly researches marble quality and chisel angles. The other starts hacking at a block, learning with each chip. A year later, one has flawless theories, the other has a statue, and the scars that prove its worth. Here's the pivot point. Action isn't the opposite of thought, it's thought's necessary counterpart. Neuroscientists confirm this. The brain's decision-making circuits strengthen through use, not rumination. Every time you act despite uncertainty, you're not just advancing a project, you're rewiring your neural pathways to tolerate ambiguity. That's why Edison could shrug off 9,999 failures. He wasn't failing, he was conditioning his mind to persist. So let's make this brutally practical. Right now, identify one project, one conversation, one leap you've overcomplicated. Maybe it's the fitness routine you've delayed until you found the perfect gym, or the difficult talk with a colleague you've rehearsed 100 times in your head. Here's your Stoic assignment. Do the clumsiest version of it today. Send the imperfect email. Start the workout with mismatched shoes. Have the conversation before you feel ready. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Readiness isn't a condition you meet. It's a muscle you build, and the only way to strengthen it, by lifting weights called action, long before you feel strong enough. Cato the Younger stood before Julius Caesar's advancing legions, outnumbered and outmatched, yet utterly unbroken. When offered clemency in exchange for submission, he spat back, "I refuse to be indebted to a tyrant for my life." That's Stoic courage in its purest form, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear dictate terms. While Hollywood sells bravery as swaggering heroes charging into battle, the Stoics knew better. Real courage often looks like quiet defiance, the single mother working 2 jobs to keep her kids fed, the whistleblower exposing corruption despite the cost, even the introvert forcing themselves to speak up in a meeting when every cell screams to stay silent. Modern life rarely demands we face literal swords, but our battles are no less real. Public speaking consistently tops surveys as humanity's greatest fear, above heights, spiders, even death. Why? Because standing before a crowd triggers our primal terror of rejection. The Stoic approach here isn't about eliminating butterflies, it's about teaching them to fly in formation. Consider how actors backstage channel nerves into energy, or how TD speakers reframe anxiety as excitement. The physical sensations are identical: racing heart, sweaty palms, only the narrative changes. That's the core insight. Courage isn't a feeling. It's a decision to act regardless of what you feel. This reveals the critical distinction Stoicism emphasizes between bravery and bravado. Bravery acknowledges the risk but proceeds because the cause matters more. Bravado, on the other hand, is performance posturing to conceal insecurity. Think of the colleague who dominates meetings with loud opinions but crumbles when challenged, versus the one who speaks sparingly yet unflinchingly stands by their convictions. One is playing a role, the other is rooted in principle. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily, ruling an empire while privately journaling about his insecurities. His courage wasn't in pretending to be fearless, but in leading despite his doubts. Now examine your own life. Where have you disguised retreat as practicality? Maybe it's staying in a safe but stagnant job while calling it being responsible, or avoiding tough conversations by labeling them unnecessary drama. These rationalizations are fear in camouflage, the mind's clever tricks to keep us in familiar discomfort rather than face growth's uncertainty. The Stoics would ask, what's the cost of this so-called practicality? Years of unfulfilled potential, relationships stuck in superficiality, a life measured in what-ifs. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Courage isn't a singular grand gesture. It's a daily practice, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. It's the entrepreneur launching before feeling ready, the artist sharing vulnerable work, the parent admitting they don't have all the answers. Each act builds what the Stoics called hexis, a habit of character stronger than any fleeting emotion. So next time fear whispers, wait, ask yourself, is this wisdom or resistance in disguise? Because the door to your best life doesn't open when fear disappears. It opens when you turn the knob anyway. Epictetus once told his students to imagine life as a banquet where dishes pass by, some within reach, others not. If the lamp goes out, he said, will you throw yourself on the floor in despair? No, you'll simply eat by the light that remains. That's the essence of Stoic indifference, not apathy, but razor-sharp discernment about what deserves your energy. The lamp isn't the problem, your reaction to its flickering is. Modern life bombards us with endless lamps: social media feuds, office politics, the relentless chase for trends, each masquerading as urgent. But what if the secret to focus isn't adding more discipline, but subtracting the trivial? Consider history's most prolific creators. Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony while deaf. Frida Kahlo painted masterpieces from her bed, imprisoned by chronic pain. Their genius wasn't fueled by perfect conditions, but by radical indifference to distractions. While lesser artists obsessed over critics or rivals, they conserved their creative fire for what mattered. A contemporary example, author Haruki Murakami, who for decades has followed the same monastic routine, up at 4 a.m., writing for 5 hours, then running or swimming. When asked about literary trends, he shrugs, "That's not my battlefield." His indifference isn't arrogance, it's the deliberate preservation of attention for his craft. Here's where most misunderstand Stoic indifference. It's not about becoming emotionally numb or dismissing everything as meaningless. It's about tiered priorities. The Stoics divided life into 3 baskets: what you control, your judgments and actions; what you influence, collaborations, relationships; and what you don't, other people's opinions, market crashes, the weather. Indifference applies only to that third basket, not because those things don't exist, but because your worry won't change them. Imagine two farmers planting seeds. One frets daily over rain forecasts, the other tends his fields regardless. When drought comes, guess who's better prepared? Let's make this painfully personal. Grab your phone and check your screen time report. How many minutes vanished into scrolling celebrity gossip or heated debates about sports trades? Now calculate what that time could have grown if invested differently. A language learned, a novel drafted, muscles built. The math stings because it reveals the hidden cost of caring about things that don't care back. The Stoics called this paying for what isn't yours. Every mental coin spent on trivial outrage is one less for your actual kingdom. So here's the challenge. For 1 week, conduct an attention audit. Each time you feel anger, anxiety, or envy bubbling up, pause and ask, does this belong to me? If it's in that third basket, someone else's success, a viral outrage tweet, the 100th political headline, visualize placing it on Epictetus' passing platter. Watch how quickly your mind clears space for what truly nourishes you. Because here's the liberating truth nobody tells you. Focus isn't something you find. It's something you uncover by stopping the leaks. Seneca watched the seasoned sailors of Rome return from months at sea and noted something profound. Their hands weren't just calloused, they were capable in ways land-bound men could never understand. Difficulties strengthen the mind, he wrote, as labor does the body. This isn't just resilience, it's anti-fragility, the rare quality of systems that don't merely withstand chaos but are forged by it. Think of a bone that heals thicker after a fracture, or a forest that grows more fire-resistant after controlled burns. Now apply that to your mind, the setbacks you've been cursing. They might be the exact stressor your growth required. Most people misunderstand resilience as passive endurance, white-knuckling through hardship until it passes. But Stoic resilience is active. It's the difference between a clay vase and a steel blade. Drop the vase and it shatters, temper the steel and it becomes sharper. Look at the startup founders who have pivoted their way to success. Brian Chesky sold cereal boxes to fund Airborne during the 2008 recession. Stuart Butterfield transformed a failed video game into Slack. These aren't just comeback stories, they're proofs of anti-fragility in action. The obstacles didn't break them, they revealed hidden pathways. Here's where Stoicism flips the script on modern self-help. You've been told to bounce back from adversity. But what if the goal isn't to return to who you were, but to become who you're capable of being? When Marcus Aurelius lost his father young, he didn't just cope, he apprenticed under philosophers, turning grief into gravitas. When Zeno of Citium lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't rebuild his old life, he founded Stoicism itself. Fragility clings to what was, anti-fragility builds what could be. So let's make this visceral. Recall a recent setback, a rejected proposal, a missed promotion, a project that fizzled. Now ask, what did this expose that needed strengthening? Maybe that failed pitch revealed gaps in your communication skills, gifts now visible only because the spotlight hit them. Perhaps the botched deadline exposed time management flaws you'd rationalized for years. The Stoics called this the gift of obstacles, not because suffering is virtuous, but because friction reveals where you need traction. Tonight, try this reframe. List 3 current frustrations, then complete this sentence for each. This is difficult because I need to grow in. The coworker conflict isn't just annoyance, it's a masterclass in emotional intelligence. The financial squeeze isn't merely stress, it's a crash course in resourcefulness. Even the loneliness you feel, that's not emptiness, it's space being cleared for deeper connections. Anti-fragility doesn't mean you enjoy the storm. It means you trust the sailor it's shaping you to become. Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a ritual that would seem radical today. Before checking messages or scrolling feeds, he'd whisper to himself, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This wasn't just positive thinking, it was deliberate conditioning. While modern mornings often start with reactive chaos, snoozed alarms, rushed decisions, dopamine hits from notifications, the Stoics treated dawn as sacred ground. They understood what neuroscience now confirms. The first hours after waking set the trajectory for your entire day. Your morning routine isn't just about productivity. It's the forge where discipline turns into freedom. Consider the Navy SEALs' infamous 4:30 a.m. wake-ups. Their precision under extreme stress isn't genetic luck. It's baked into daily rituals so ingrained they become instinct. Bed made flawlessly, gear arranged identically every time, physical training before sunrise. These aren't arbitrary rules, they're behavioral architecture designed to make excellence automatic. When bullets fly, there's no room for decision fatigue. The same principle applies to civilian life. Ever notice how your best days often follow a morning run, a quiet coffee, or planned priorities? That's not coincidence, it's the compound interest of small disciplines. Here's where Stoicism dismantles a modern myth. Discipline isn't the enemy of spontaneity, it's the foundation. Jazz musicians improvise brilliantly because they've mastered scales. Chefs create dazzling dishes only after drilling knife skills for thousands of hours. The rituals you resent now, the early wake-up, the meal prep, the inbox zero, are the very structures that will one day give you wings. Seneca captured this paradox perfectly. No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Your daily habits are the adversity you choose, the proving ground where you wrestle comfort into submission. So let's cut through the noise, forget overhauling your entire life overnight. Instead, ask what single habit, if mastered, would create ripple effects through every other area. For some, it's the 5-minute journal, a Stoic practice of noting wins, lessons, and intentions. For others, it's the cold shower that teaches the mind to embrace discomfort. Even something as simple as leaving your phone outside the bedroom transforms mornings from reactive to intentional. The key isn't the habit size, it's its consistency. Musonius Rufus trained his students to embrace hardship not as punishment, but as inoculation. How can one become temperate if one only knows luxury? How brave if one endures only comfort? Tonight, try this experiment. Set your alarm 30 minutes earlier, not to cram more tasks, but to claim stillness. Light a candle instead of a screen. Write 3 sentences about who you intend to be today before the world tells you who to be. That tiny ritual is your rebellion against mediocrity, your daily declaration that you're not just passing through life, you're crafting it. Because here's the truth no productivity guru will sell you. Freedom isn't the absence of routine. It's the courage to design one that makes you unstoppable. Epictetus told his students a simple story about a broken vase that changed everything. When you kiss your child good night, he said, whisper to yourself, tomorrow they may die. At first glance, this sounds morbid until you grasp the radical freedom hidden within. The vase isn't precious because it's unbreakable. It's precious precisely because it could shatter at any moment. That's the paradox of Stoic detachment. Not cold indifference, but fierce appreciation untainted by clinging. Modern hustle culture preaches the opposite. Attach your worth to metrics, grind until you collapse, stake your happiness on some distant finish line. No wonder burnout clinics are overflowing with people who followed the script perfectly but forgot to ask, who owns whom? Take elite athletes who master this balance. The greatest tennis players don't obsess over championship points during a match. They focus on executing this serve, this return, this footwork, controlling only what's in their hands while the scoreboard does what it will. Roger Federer once described playing his best matches as being in a state of forgetting, so absorbed in the craft that outcomes became irrelevant. That's Stoic detachment in motion, pouring everything into your effort while holding results lightly. Compare this to the corporate warrior checking stock prices hourly, tying their self-worth to numbers that fluctuate like desert winds. One approach builds enduring mastery, the other manufactures anxiety disguised as ambition. Your phone buzzes with another productivity guru preaching obsession or failure, but the Stoics would ask, what have you sacrificed at the altar of attachment? That startup founder fixated on valuation metrics stops enjoying the creative process. The parent micromanaging college applications misses their child's last years at home. Even the artist revising their work endlessly for critics' approval drains the joy from their craft. Detachment isn't quitting the game, it's remembering you're more than your score. When Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome, he kept a slave whose sole job was whispering in his ear during victory parades, "This too shall pass." The emperor needed reminding that even glory was a borrowed costume. So here's your assignment. Pick one arena where attachment is quietly exhausting you. Maybe it's the job title you've tied to your identity, the social media likes that dictate your mood, or the 5-year plan that can't accommodate life's beautiful detours. Now try Epictetus' experiment. Hold it like a sandcastle at high tide. Marvel at its shape, then watch the waves reclaim it. The paradox, that temporary mindset often produces more lasting results than white-knuckled control. The writer who creates for love of words outlasts the one chasing trends. The entrepreneur solving real problems surpasses the opportunist hunting quick exits. Even relationships thrive when we stop demanding guarantees and start appreciating presences. Detachment reveals the ultimate power move. When you own nothing, you gain everything, because nothing owns you. The vase was always going to break. The match was always going to end. The secret wasn't in preserving the form, but in fully experiencing the moment before it passed. That's where your real power lies, not in controlling life's river, but in learning to swim with open hands. Marcus Aurelius would often stare at the night sky from his battle camp, tracing constellations while reflecting on an empire that seemed vast until he glimpsed its true scale against the universe. "Think of the substance of the whole," he wrote, "and how small your share. That's the view from above, Stoicism's most humbling mental exercise. It's not about diminishing your life's value, but revealing how much energy we waste on microscopic dramas." Picture a CEO reviewing quarterly reports when their assistant spills coffee on a contract. Red-faced and fuming, they're seconds from an outburst until they pause, close their eyes, and mentally zoom out. The office shrinks to a speck, the city becomes a grid, the planet, a pale blue dot orbiting an average star in one of 100 billion galaxies. Suddenly, the coffee stain isn't just insignificant, it's laughably so. This practice isn't escapism, it's clarity. Ancient Stoics visualized their cities from hilltops to gain perspective. Today, astronauts describe the overview effect, the cognitive shift when viewing Earth from space. Political borders vanish, grudges seem absurd. What felt urgent minutes ago now feels like children squabbling over sandcastle designs at high tide. The view from above exposes a liberating truth. Most stressors are magnified by proximity. That colleague's snide comment from cosmic distance, it's just vibrating air molecules. The traffic jam making you late, a temporary alignment of metal boxes on a ribbon of pavement. Even genuine problems, financial strain, health scares, take their proper proportion when held against the timeline of mountains forming and stars dying. Try this tonight. Step outside and locate the brightest star. Remember, its light traveled years to reach your eyes. By the time it arrives, the star itself may have collapsed. Now reconsider the email that ruined your afternoon. Will its contents matter when that light reaches another planet in a millennium? The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore real responsibilities. They were teaching us to distinguish between genuine priorities and self-inflicted drama. A project deadline matters, your child's recital matters, but the neighbor's loud music or the disapproving glance from a stranger. These are pebbles mistaken for boulders because we've pressed our noses too close to the ground. Here's the practical magic of this exercise. It doesn't require actual spaceflight. The next time irritation flares a delayed flight, a passive-aggressive text pause and perform mental altitude adjustment. First, visualize the scene from 10 feet up, then 100, then from orbit. Watch how the crisis shrinks. Pair this with the Stoic question, will this matter in 5 years? If the answer's no, dial down your reaction accordingly. The goal isn't to erase emotion, but to allocate it wisely. Save your fire for what truly deserves burning, because here's what changes when you adopt the cosmic view. You stop letting pebbles trigger avalanches. The boss who nitpicks your report becomes a fleeting character in the epic of your life. The social media troll, a mayfly buzzing at a giant. This perspective doesn't make you passive, it makes you strategic. You'll still fight for promotions, create art, and defend loved ones, but now you'll do it with the calm of a general who knows the difference between a skirmish and the war. And that's the real victory, not controlling the universe, but realizing how little of it deserves controlling you. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, often reminded his students, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak." That simple ratio holds a profound truth. Wisdom isn't just about what you say, it's about what you choose not to. In an era where hot takes and knee-jerk reactions dominate, Stoic silence is the counterintuitive superpower you've been overlooking. Think of the last meeting you sat through where everyone spoke, but nobody truly said anything. Contrast that with the rare moments of deep work, when you're immersed in a project, undistracted, your mind firing on all cylinders. The difference: one environment is cluttered with noise, the other is purified by restraint. History's most effective leaders understood this balance. Theodore Roosevelt's foreign policy mantra, "Speak softly and carry a big stick," wasn't just political strategy, it was Stoicism in action. While lesser leaders blustered and postured, Roosevelt conserved his words like a general conserves ammunition. Every unspoken opinion was energy saved for decisive action. The same principle applies to your daily interactions. That coworker who dominates every discussion but rarely contributes substance. They're not winning influence, they're leaking credibility. The Stoics recognize that speech, like any resource, suffers from diminishing returns. The more you lavish it on trivialities, the less it's worth when it matters. Here's the uncomfortable question: how much of your daily chatter is actually necessary? Not the kind that builds rapport or solves problems, but the reflexive opinions, the unsolicited advice, the debates you engage in just to prove a point. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this nightly, auditing his words like a merchant balancing ledgers. Ask yourself, is this essential? Because every unnecessary word isn't just noise, it's a theft of focus from what truly demands your attention. Imagine a sculptor who stops mid-chisel to argue about the weather. The marble doesn't care about the distraction, but the sculpture suffers for it. Try this experiment today. For every conversation, mentally press pause before speaking. Ask, does this add value or just volume? you'll quickly spot the difference between contributing and performing. The Stoics called this strategic silence, not withholding your voice out of timidity, but deploying it with precision. The artist doesn't waste paint, the composer doesn't squander notes. Why should your words be any different the next time you're tempted to weigh in on office gossip or defend an opinion nobody challenged? Remember Roosevelt's stick. Real influence doesn't come from having the loudest voice in the room. It comes from knowing when the room isn't worth your voice. Seneca once compared hardship to a refiner's fire, not meant to destroy gold but to purify it. That's the essence of Stoic endurance. Suffering isn't something to escape, but a forge where strength is tempered. Think of the gym. When you push through the burn of a final rep, your muscles don't break, they rebuild stronger. Now contrast that with the couch's siren call of instant comfort. One path leaves you sore but empowered, the other leaves you numb but stagnant. The Stoics weren't masochists. They were realists who recognized that growth and discomfort share an unbreakable bond. J.K. Rowling's story embodies this perfectly. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, her manuscript faced 12 rejections, each one a searing reminder of failure. Yet she later reflected that those rejections stripped away everything non-essential, leaving only her raw determination. What if she'd stopped at the third no to avoid further pain? The world would have lost not just a beloved story, but proof that rejection isn't the opposite of success, it's part of its anatomy. Stoicism reframes suffering as the tuition we pay for mastery. The athlete saw muscles, the artist scrapped drafts, even the entrepreneur's sleepless nights. These aren't penalties, they're receipts proving you're enrolled in the school of excellence. Here's the question most people avoid. What worthwhile discomfort are you dodging? Maybe it's the awkwardness of networking events that could advance your career. Or the vulnerability of sharing your art before it feels perfect. Even the mental fatigue of learning a new skill when binge watching would be easier. These aren't random hardships, they're signposts. The discomfort you resist most often points to the growth you need most. The Stoics trained like athletes for this very reason. They'd voluntarily sleep on hard floors or fast for days, not to punish themselves, but to prove comfort wasn't their master. When real adversity struck, exile, illness, persecution, they'd already built resilience through controlled doses of struggle. So try this reframe today. Next time you feel resistance, whether it's the dread of a difficult conversation or the grind of a long project, pause and ask, if this discomfort were a gym for my character, what muscle is it building? The answer might reveal why you've been avoiding it. Procrastination often masquerades as patience, and fear loves to dress up as practicality. But endurance isn't about tolerating pain, it's about decoding its message. The fire that feels like it's consuming you might just be the one that reveals your gold. Marcus Aurelius described the mind as an inner citadel, a fortress that remains unshaken even when the outer walls of circumstance crumble. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, he wrote, reminding us that while we can't control every external event, we alone hold the keys to our mental gates. But here's the modern challenge. Our citadels are under siege like never before, not by barbarians at the gates, but by endless pings, scrolls, and notifications, each one a tiny battering ram against our focus. The average person now checks their phone 261 times a day, fragmenting attention into smaller and smaller shards. This isn't just distraction, it's a hostile takeover of your mental sovereignty. Cal Newport's concept of deep work exposes the cost of this invasion. He found that it takes nearly 25 minutes to regain deep concentration after a single interruption. Imagine your mind as a castle drawbridge. Every email alert, every social media refresh, every urgent message forces that bridge down, allowing invaders to storm in. The result, a mind that's perpetually occupied but never truly productive. The Stoics anticipated this struggle centuries ago. They didn't have smartphones, but they understood the danger of mental clutter. Epictetus warned, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid about external things. In other words, guard your attention like a scarce resource, because it is. So who or what has overstayed their welcome in your mental space? Start auditing your cognitive real estate, that app that hijacks your mornings with doom scrolling. Evict it, the acquaintance who drains your energy with constant complaints. Revoke their access. Even productive distractions like compulsive news checks or endless podcast consumption can be squatters if they're crowding out time for reflection. The Stoics practiced this through selective input. Seneca would regularly take multi-day retreats from Rome's chaos to recover himself. Today, this might mean digital Sabbaths, notification fasting, or simply designating deep work hours where your mind operates like a fortified city, open for business on your terms. Here's the tactical shift. Stop thinking of focus as something you lose and start treating it as something you defend. Every time you resist checking your phone during a conversation, you're stationing guards at the gate. When you close your laptop to journal or meditate, you're reinforcing the walls. Even small actions, like leaving your phone in another room during dinner, are acts of mental sovereignty. Because the ultimate Stoic truth is this: your mind is the last truly private territory. No algorithm can enter unless you lower the drawbridge. No crisis can penetrate unless you grant it audience. The inner citadel doesn't ask for perfect conditions, just vigilant stewardship over what you let cross the threshold. Cato the Younger stood as the unbending pillar of Roman republicanism, yet his tactics were anything but rigid. When political enemies flooded the Senate with corrupt appointments, he didn't just deliver virtuous speeches, he filibustered for hours until the session collapsed. When bribery threatened elections, he didn't simply lament moral decay, he stationed armed guards at polling stations. This was Stoic pragmatism in action, unyielding on principles but ingenious in execution. The lesson, ideals without impact are just self-congratulation. Modern movements often split into two camps: the purists who reject any compromise and the pragmatists who lose sight of why they started. The first group produces elegant manifestos that gather dust. The second achieves hollow wins that betray their cause. Elon Musk embodies Cato's balance. SpaceX's early rockets weren't flawless marvels of engineering. They were good enough prototypes that flew, failed, and iterated. Had he waited for perfection, humanity might still be earthbound. The Stoic approach asks a ruthless question: is your insistence on purity actually cowardice in disguise? Fear of messy real-world tests masquerading as high standards. Consider two activists fighting poverty. One refuses to partner with corporations, dismissing all profit-driven systems as inherently corrupt. The other works with businesses to fund job training programs, accepting imperfect allies to create tangible change. Both want justice, but only one builds houses while the other debates blueprints. This tension lives in your daily choices too. That side project you won't launch until every detail is polished. The relationship conversation you avoid because you can't guarantee the perfect outcome. Stoicism draws a line between excellence and paralysis. The industrialist Andrew Carnegie funded thousands of libraries not because he approved of every book they'd contain, but because he knew even imperfect access to knowledge uplifted communities. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while acknowledging his own flaws daily in his journal. Pragmatism isn't selling out, it's recognizing that the world changes through increments, not absolutes. So examine where you've been waiting for ideal conditions. The workout routine delayed until you find the perfect gym. The career move postponed until some mythical moment of readiness. Here's the litmus test. If you had to choose between a flawed action that helps 10 people today or a perfect solution that might help 100 in some uncertain future, which serves virtue more? Stoicism's answer is clear: better to light a candle than endlessly curse the darkness. Your ideals deserve more than your admiration. They deserve your ingenuity in bringing them to life, one imperfect but meaningful step at a time. Because in the end, Cato didn't preserve the Republic through speeches alone. He fought for it with every tool at hand. Epictetus cut through the noise of empty leadership advice with 4 piercing words: "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a gauntlet thrown at the feet of anyone who aspires to lead. Think of the last motivational speaker you heard, dazzling a crowd with polished stories of triumph. Now picture Nelson Mandela, silently studying Afrikaans in his prison cell, not to rally an audience, but to understand his captors well enough to one day negotiate their surrender. One performance inspires applause, the other transforms history. The difference isn't in the words spoken, but in the weight of actions taken when no one is watching. Modern culture confuses leadership with visibility. We measure influence by follower counts and mistake volume for virtue. But the Stoics recognized a timeless truth. Real authority doesn't come from what you say you believe, it's etched in what you do when belief is costly. Consider 2 managers, one who delivers rousing speeches about integrity but cuts corners to hit quarterly targets, and another who quietly returns an overpaid invoice or defends an unpopular but ethical decision. Their teams notice, not because either announced their values, but because values, like gravity, reveal themselves through consistent action. Mandela's 27 years in prison could have been a masterclass in bitterness. Instead, he turned Robben Island into a crucible of leadership, exercising daily to stay strong, teaching fellow prisoners, even befriending guards. No cameras recorded these acts. No social media amplified them. Yet when he finally walked free, the world didn't just see a freed dissident. They encountered a man who'd already won the battle where it mattered most within himself. That's the alchemy of Stoic leadership. Ordinary moments become extraordinary lessons when lived with intention. Now turn the lens inward. Who observes your unguarded moments? Your children, your colleagues, the barrister who sees how you treat strangers. What silent curriculum are you teaching through your reactions to delays, failures, or disrespect? A parent preaching patience while scrolling through their phone during a child's story time undermines their own lesson. A CEO touting work-life balance while emailing staff at midnight broadcasts louder values than any memo. Leadership isn't a role you step into. It's a current you generate through countless small consistencies. The Stoics practiced this through what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of action, aligning deeds with ideals so tightly that no gap remained for hypocrisy to creep in. When George Washington refused a king's crown after the Revolutionary War, he wasn't just making a political statement. He was embodying the Republican virtues he'd fought for, proving that true leaders don't cling to power, they model its responsible use. Today, this might look like the entrepreneur who takes a pay cut before laying off staff, or the teacher who stays late not for recognition, but because a student's breakthrough matters more than clocking out. Here's your challenge for 1 week: conduct a leadership audit, not of your speeches but of your silent choices. When frustration bubbles up in traffic, what does your clenched jaw teach about emotional control? When gossip swirls at work, does your changed subject or engaged listening define the culture you claim to want? The world doesn't need more polished mission statements. It needs more people whose lives are their loudest testimony, because here's the secret Mandela and the Stoics knew: influence isn't taken, it's earned, one unobserved act of integrity at a time. Seneca once wrote, "True joy is a serious matter," a paradox that shatters every misconception about Stoicism as some grim, joyless philosophy. The Stoics weren't opposed to happiness. They were archaeologists of it, digging past fleeting pleasures to uncover something far more enduring. Imagine two travelers, one chasing sunset after sunset, desperate to bottle the perfect moment, the other sitting quietly in a simple room, radiant with gratitude for the slant of afternoon light through dusty curtains. Both experience joy, but only one source is inexhaustible. This is the Stoic secret. Happiness isn't something you find. It's something you choose, regardless of circumstance. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, embodied this truth in history's darkest laboratory. Starving, freezing, and surrounded by death, he noticed something extraordinary. Some prisoners clung to inner freedom even as their bodies were enslaved. They found beauty in shared crusts of bread, humor in whispered jokes, meaning in comforting fellow inmates. Frankl later wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude." That's Stoic joy in its purest form, not the absence of suffering, but the presence of unshakable appreciation for what remains. Modern culture conflates joy with sensory bombardment, louder music, richer foods, more thrilling experiences. But this is pleasure, not happiness. Pleasure depends on externals. Joy grows from how you relate to them. Picture a child on Christmas morning surrounded by unopened gifts, the anticipation, the wide-eyed wonder. Now recall that same child hours later, bored amidst a sea of torn wrapping paper. The gifts didn't change, the child's relationship to them did. The Stoics recognized this pattern centuries before neuroscience confirmed it. We adapt to pleasure, but joy deepens with attention. So where does this leave us in daily practice? Start small. The steam rising from your morning coffee, really see it. The way your dog's ears perk up when you say their name, truly hear it. These aren't trivial moments, they're the raw material of joy waiting for your recognition. Seneca advised his students to end each day by asking, "What did I truly enjoy?" Not what entertained or distracted them, but what nourished their soul. A conversation where time disappeared, a task that challenged just enough. These are the threads Stoics weave into unbreakable contentment. Tonight, try this experiment. Pause before sleep and name 3 ordinary moments you could have overlooked: the weight of blankets, the rhythm of rain, the way laughter lines crinkle around a loved one's eyes. No grand gestures required, because here's the truth hiding in plain sight. Joy isn't scarce, our awareness of it is. The Stoics didn't deny life's harshness, they sharpened their ability to find light within it. And that's a skill no circumstance can steal. Marcus Aurelius once compared human potential to an oak tree. What begins as a fragile acorn, buried in darkness, requires decades of patient growth before its roots can split stone. No one, he wrote, complains that fig trees bear figs too slowly, yet we rage when our own growth demands time. This is the Stoic view of delayed gratification, not as deprivation, but as alignment with nature's deepest rhythms. Consider the absurdity of shaking an acorn after 2 weeks, demanding it produce shade. Yet how often do we approach our own ambitions with that same impatience, abandoning projects, diets, or skills before they've had time to take root? Warren Buffett's fortune offers a masterclass in this principle. 90% of his wealth was earned after his 60th birthday, not through sudden windfalls, but through 6 decades of consistent compounding. While get-rich-quick schemes peddle the illusion of shortcuts, Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway grew like that oak tree, steadily reinvesting dividends, weathering storms, and letting time transform modest choices into staggering results. The math is ruthless in its fairness. A 25-year-old investing just $5,000 annually at average market returns would amass over $2 million by 65. The same investments made starting at 40 yield less than a quarter of that. Time isn't just a factor, it's the alchemist that turns discipline into abundance. Modern culture thrives on manufactured urgency, limited time offers, overnight success stories, and algorithms that reward impulsive reactions. The Stoics would recognize this as a rebellion against natural law. A redwood doesn't grow taller by straining upward, it grows by sinking roots deeper. The same applies to mastery. When violinist Jascha Heifetz was asked how to get to Carnegie Hall, his answer wasn't go viral or find a shortcut. It was practice. 3 hours daily for 20 years creates a virtuoso. 3 hours weekly for 3 months creates frustration. The difference isn't talent, it's tolerance for the invisible phase when progress feels glacial. Here's the pivot point. Delayed gratification isn't about denying pleasure. It's about trading trivial presents for monumental futures. The writer who logs 500 words daily might not publish for years, but their body of work will dwarf the sporadic bursts of inspired peers. The entrepreneur reinvesting profits instead of buying luxury cars builds an empire while others lease status symbols. Even relationships deepen through small, consistent investments, weekly date nights that compound into unshakable bonds, or bedtime stories that shape a child's character one page at a time. So ask yourself this Stoic question: what acorn can you plant today whose shade you may never sit under? Maybe it's the language app open for 15 minutes daily, the side project worked on after the day job, or the retirement account funded before the paycheck hits your checking balance. The oak tree doesn't regret its slow growth when it finally shelters generations, nor will you, because the ultimate revenge against a culture obsessed with speed is to move deliberately and let time crown your patience with results no shortcut can match. Cleans arrived at the Stoa with battered knuckles and a broken dream. Once a boxer, now a penniless immigrant washing dishes to afford philosophy lectures. His fellow students mocked the sweaty laborer daring to study with scholars, until Zeno of Citium noticed something extraordinary. The same discipline that once powered Clean's punches now fueled pre-dawn study sessions. Where others saw a washed-up athlete, Zeno saw adaptable potential. This became Stoicism's secret weapon, not rigid dogma, but the art of bending without breaking. 2 millennia later, Nintendo's headquarters displays a similar lesson in resilience. The company that now dominates gaming began as a playing card manufacturer in 1889, survived bankruptcy by pivoting to taxis and love hotels, then reinvented itself again as an electronic pioneer when its core business crumbled. The pattern is unmistakable. Survival doesn't favor the strongest, but the most adaptable. Modern careers worship specialization like a religion. The deeper your niche, the higher your worth. But the Stoics recognized a dangerous flaw in this logic. When circumstances shift, the hyper-specialized become obsolete first. Consider the fate of master scribes after Gutenberg's press, or film developers when digital cameras arrived. Contrast this with individuals like Julia Child, who pivoted from spy to chef in her 30s, or Ray Kroc, who transformed from milkshake machine salesman to fast food mogul at 52. Their success wasn't despite their detours, but because of them. Adaptability isn't plan B, it's the only plan that never expires. So where does this leave your carefully crafted 5-year plan? The Stoics would interrogate it mercilessly. Is this roadmap serving your growth, or have you become its prisoner? The tech founder clinging to outdated code, the professor refusing new teaching methods, even the parent enforcing childhood rules on adult children, all mistake consistency for virtue. Real strength manifests in what Seneca called the courage to revise. When the Roman general Sulla captured Athens, his soldiers began looting priceless philosophy texts for kindling until one officer intervened, the same battle-hardened commander who later funded Plato's Academy's restoration. That's adaptability in its highest form, the flexibility to shift from destroyer to patron when wisdom demands it. Now turn the lens inward. What cherished assumption needs dismantling? Perhaps it's the degree you spent years earning but no longer serves you, or the business model that's profitable yet soul-crushing. Even personal relationships require this plasticity. The parent who adjusts their approach as children mature, or the partner who redefines roles when careers evolve. Adaptation isn't failure, it's the recognition that rivers don't lose their essence when they change course. They simply find better paths to the sea. Here's the litmus test. When was the last time you changed your mind about something fundamental? If the answer doesn't come easily, you might be mistaking stubbornness for strength. The oak tree snaps in hurricanes while bamboo survives by swaying. Both grow toward the light, only one understands that sometimes growth requires bending. Your ideals can remain uncompromising while your methods evolve. That's the paradox Stoicism reveals. True flexibility isn't the opposite of resilience, it's resilience in motion. Marcus Aurelius often gazed at the night sky, contemplating a profound truth. What benefits the hive benefits the bee. This wasn't poetic musing, it was the Stoic blueprint for justice. Excellence untethered from service is merely polished selfishness. Consider two versions of success. One hoards wealth in offshore accounts, measures worth by social media followers, and climbs ladders only to pull them up behind. The other builds schools with Gates philanthropy, engineers life-saving vaccines like Jonas Salk, who refused to patent his polio discovery, or reinvents capitalism as Patagonia's founder did by making Earth the sole shareholder. Both paths require brilliance, but only one transforms it into legacy. The Stoics redefined greatness not by what you accumulate, but by what you circulate. When Seneca advised Nero, he didn't just teach rhetoric, he funded Rome's first public baths, giving clean water to thousands. Modern parallels abound. The tech CEO who open sources code to democratize innovation. The teacher who stays late not for overtime pay, but because one student's aha moment outweighs clock watching. Even small acts carry this ethos, the barrister who remembers regulars' orders, transforming routine service into human connection. These aren't just kind gestures, they're justice in action. The Stoic belief that your gifts aren't fully yours until shared. Patagonia's radical business model exposes the illusion of zero-sum thinking. By donating all profits to environmental causes, Yvonne Chouinard proved that companies can thrive while healing the planet. Contrast this with corporations that treat ethics as a PR afterthought. The difference isn't profit margins, it's purpose. A Stoic approach to commerce asks, how does this transaction improve the web of life? Medieval stonemasons chiseled intricate details on cathedral buttresses no one would ever see, knowing their work supported something greater. Your daily work holds that same potential, whether you're writing software or scrubbing floors. So here's the challenge. Map your next achievement not just by what it gains you, but by its ripple effects. That promotion, mentor someone overlooked on your way up. That creative project leaves space for collaborators to shine. Even personal fitness goals can serve, training for a marathon, run for charity, and amplify your miles. The Stoics measured wealth in networks strengthened, minds enlightened, burdens lifted. Your career isn't a solo sprint, It's a relay where the baton gets heavier with more hands holding it. And that's the secret most miss. The more you light others' torches, the brighter your own path becomes. Seneca warned his students, "The crowd corrupts, no one emerges from it unscathed." He wasn't speaking of literal disease, but of something far more contagious, the slow erosion of standards when we absorb the habits of those around us. Picture two ponds, one fed by mountain springs, the other by runoff from a highway. Over time, their waters grow indistinguishable. That's the danger of unchosen influences. The Stoics practiced deliberate self-exile, not as escapism, but as environmental triage, recognizing that even the strongest minds eventually mirror their surroundings. When Seneca himself retreated from Rome's political circus, he wasn't running from responsibility. He was safeguarding his ability to think clearly enough to return and serve effectively. Modern life has replaced crowded forums with endless scrolls. Your social media feed operates on the same principle as Seneca's corrupting crowds. Algorithms amplify outrage, normalize comparison, and reward performative extremes. A study from the University of Pennsylvania found that limiting social media use to 30 minutes daily significantly reduced loneliness and depression. Why? Because passive consumption of curated highlight reels distorts reality like carnival mirrors. Thoreau understood this when he left Concord for Walden Pond, writing, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately." His cabin wasn't a rejection of society, but a laboratory where he could test his ideals against nature's impartial feedback. The Stoic approach to environment isn't about monastic isolation. It's about curating inputs with the precision of a sommelier selecting wines. Consider the difference between attending a riot and walking through an art gallery. Both are experiences, but one agitates while the other elevates. Naval Ravikant, the philosopher-investor, practices this by never watching news channels, calling them addiction machines for negative energy. Instead, he fills his reading queue with centuries-old texts, timeless ideas immune to today's viral hysterias. The principle applies everywhere. The colleagues you lunch with shape your professional standards more than mission statements. The podcast you tolerate during commutes train your subconscious more than intentional study sessions. So here's your challenge. Conduct an influence audit. Scroll through your last 24 hours, the conversations you absorbed, the media you consumed, even the background noise you tolerated. Now ask, which of these would Seneca label as crowds? That reality TV show normalizing pettiness as entertainment. The group chat where complaining is the default language. Even the harmless habit of doom-scrolling before bed, what's it teaching your brain to expect from the world? Self-exile doesn't require a cabin in the woods. It starts with muting one toxic account, replacing a gossip break with a philosophy podcast, or setting boundaries with that friend who treats cynicism as sophistication. Thoreau's experiment lasted 2 years, but his insights endured centuries. Yours need only last 7 days. Pick one influence, just one, to distance from this week. Notice what grows in the space it leaves. Maybe it's the quiet where new ideas take root, or the clarity that comes when you stop letting others define normal. Because here's the truth the Stoics and Thoreau both proved: you can't change the world's noise, but you can choose which frequencies tune your mind. Epictetus woke each dawn with a razor-sharp question: what part of me is still asleep? Not his body, but his mind's potential. While modern alarms begrudgingly drag us into consciousness, Stoic mornings began with deliberate awakening of purpose. The snooze button symbolizes more than extra sleep. It's the first daily surrender to inertia. Contrast this with Winston Churchill's wartime routine: awake by 6:30, breakfast in bed with parliamentary reports, dictating memos before most touched their toothbrushes. His secret wasn't more hours, it was claiming the quiet ones before the world's demands could intrude. Ancient Stoics structured mornings like mental dojos. Before checking scrolls or receiving guests, they'd perform 3 mental exercises, recalling mortality to sharpen focus. This could be my last dawn, envisioning challenges to preempt reactions. How will I handle interruptions? And anchoring to core principles, what virtues will guide me today? Modern neuroscience validates this. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, is most receptive in the first 90 minutes after waking. Waste that window scrolling news feeds, and you've sacrificed peak clarity to trivia. Invest it intentionally, and you architect the day's trajectory. Consider the Japanese concept of ikujio-zamai, single-minded immersion in a morning ritual. Author Haruki Murakami rises at 4 a.m. to write in undisturbed silence, comparing the discipline to lowering oneself into a deep well to reach the subconscious. Stoics would recognize this as prosach, attention's disciplined cultivation. Your morning ritual isn't about productivity hacks, it's about sovereignty. Every email answered before breakfast is a throne surrendered to others' agendas. So what 20-minute practice could recalibrate your days? For Marcus Aurelius, it was journaling by candlelight, not documenting events, but conversing with his highest self. For composer Ludwig van Beethoven, it was counting 60 coffee beans for his brew while sketching musical ideas. The form matters less than the function, a space where you, not the world, set the terms. Try this tomorrow before screens invade your mind. Spend those fragile morning minutes doing something that demands presence. Lift weights and feel each muscle's engagement. Brew tea mindfully, noting the steam's spiral. Even sitting silently, tracking your breath for 5 cycles, trains the mind to lead rather than follow. The battle for your best self isn't won in grand declarations. It's secured in these quiet morning moments when no one's watching. Win the dawn, and the day has no choice but to follow. We've journeyed through the Stoic arsenal: control over our judgments, action over excuses, resilience forged through adversity, and perspective that lifts us above life's noise. These aren't just ancient ideas, they're battle plans for anyone tired of settling. Mediocrity isn't a default setting, it's the sum of unchallenged compromises. But here's the liberating truth: every moment is a chance to recalibrate. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled an empire while wrestling his own doubts, left us with a challenge that cuts through centuries. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, no more waiting for perfect conditions or external validation. The tools are in your hands, so let's make this tangible. Before this video ends, pick one principle to activate today. Maybe it's the 5-minute morning journal to clarify your intentions, or the obstacle as fuel reframe when a setback hits. It could be as simple as pausing before reacting to a provocation, asking, "Is this within my control?" Small steps compound into unshakable strength. The sculptor doesn't attack the marble block all at once. They chip away with deliberate strokes until the form emerges. Your life is that masterpiece in progress. This isn't about overnight transformation. It's about daily rebellion against the gravitational pull of good enough. Every time you choose focus over distraction, courage over comfort, or purpose over posturing, you're not just improving your life, you're proving that mediocrity is a myth we've outgrown. The Stoics didn't promise ease, they promised agency, and that's the ultimate victory: not a life without storms, but the skill to sail through any weather. If this battle resonates with you, join us for more. Hit subscribe, and let's keep dismantling the barriers to your potential, one Stoic insight at a time. Because the world doesn't need more spectators, it needs more warriors who have remembered their strength. Your next move starts now.